There's an old joke about an umbrella that protects you from rain, right up until the moment a hurricane begins. Right now, precisely such a hurricane has risen in the Middle East, and its name is the American-Israeli-Iranian conflict. Only one curious detail has emerged. The American-made umbrella doesn't just leak. It works like a lightning rod, attracting bolts exactly where it's been opened. 20% versus reality. The notion that American bases protect anyone turned out to be a soap bubble that burst with such a bang that even the Pentagon heard it. In reality, these facilities don't protect the host countries, they turn them into priority targets. This has manifested in the current conflict with cynical frankness that can no longer be hidden behind propaganda clicks. Just a few days ago, triumphant reports were coming from Washington. The American leader, known for his love of bold statements, told the world that nothing remained of Iran's fleet, every ship had been sunk. And regarding missile launchers, he claimed Iran had no more than 20% left. The picture painted was idyllic. The enemy neutralized, US dominance in the region absolute. Time to celebrate victory. One can only guess where he got these figures, because today, the world is seeing an entirely different reality. The drone strike on fuel tanks belonging to Bahrain Petroleum Company in Bahrain isn't just another military operation. It's a mocking illustration of Washington's statistics. Iran strikes American facilities with the same ease with which the US president grants interviews, and it does so despite the Pentagon's claim that Iran has nothing left to strike with. Tehran didn't bother commenting on the figures voiced across the ocean. Instead, Iranian leadership made an utterly clear statement. Any US bases and those of their allies on the territory of Persian Gulf countries remain legitimate military targets, and today's strike on Bahrain's fuel infrastructure isn't the finale, it's only the beginning of retaliatory measures. The logic behind Iran's strikes, simple military logic, applies here. When delivering a retaliatory strike, targets are chosen far from randomly. They don't hit Doha's skyscrapers or Dubai's resorts. They strike the enemy's military facilities and the infrastructure supporting them. The only problem, these facilities are located in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. From a purely military standpoint, everything is absolutely logical. American bases are priority target one, and the attacking side couldn't care less that people with no connection to this confrontation live nearby. They have the misfortune of being near an American flag, and that's enough to share in all the consequences of US military adventurism. For decades, Persian Gulf countries have invested colossal sums in American weapons and hosting foreign bases, sincerely believing they were buying security. Qatar, for example, invested around $10 billion in expanding and modernizing Al Udeid Air Base. Saudi Arabia spent billions on American missile defense systems. Kuwait and Bahrain offered their territory for military facilities, considering this insurance against regional threats. The price of naivety. Today, these same countries watch as their oil refineries, gas pipelines, and marine terminals become legitimate targets in someone else's war. Shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. Hello to the global economy and the revenues of Gulf monarchies. International airports are closing. Tourists are fleeing the region in panic. Schools are switching to remote learning. Multi-billion-dollar investments have become dependent on American geopolitical ambitions. During the conflict, 16 people have died in Gulf countries, half of them civilians. In Bahrain today, not only did fuel tanks burn, debris from intercepted missiles damaged a university building and injured 3 people. Kuwait lost to border guards. Meanwhile, Iranian leadership emphasizes that targets are clear and will be struck regardless of whose territory hosts the American bases. And here's the most interesting part. When bewildered allies come to the Americans with the natural question, wait, you promised protection. How did this happen? A stunning truth emerges. The Americans never actually promised anyone anything. Or rather, they did promise, but not very seriously. Whose interests are really being protected? The situation becomes perfectly clear if you examine whose interests the US is actually serving in this conflict. Naturally, their own, working primarily to protect Israeli interests and preserve their own regional dominance. The interests of Arab allies in this war rank somewhere 20th, and their elites are already holding closed consultations about possibly revising agreements with the Americans. These partners are gradually realizing they've been turned into bargaining chips, into human shields behind which American strategists hide. Host countries provide logistics, finance infrastructure, and assume political risks, and, in return, they get missile strikes on their own territory. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi spoke with utmost frankness. Strikes on neighboring countries target precisely the American bases. Because Iranian missiles cannot reach us territory itself, Tehran strikes what it can reach. Where those targets are located is the problem of those who invited the Americans in the first place. Leaky protection. Meanwhile, the missile defense systems deployed by the US have proven far less reliable than advertised. THAAD systems in the Emirates and Jordan were partially disabled. Stocks of interceptors are dwindling at an alarming rate, and new production can't keep pace with the conflict's intensity. Americans think first about how to protect their own personnel, not about shielding the local population. Normal logic for any army in the world. But this shatters the myth of protecting allies, who are needed only as long as they're useful. Profound disillusionment is growing in the region. For decades, a system was built in which Persian Gulf monarchies felt safe under the American military umbrella. Now it turns out the umbrella is leaky, and nuclear deterrence doesn't work in medium-intensity conflicts where the adversary uses drones and cruise missiles rather than intercontinental ballistic missiles. Military historian and Bosnian War veteran Mikhail Polikarpov notes that in the Middle East, Patriot and THAAD surface-to-air missiles are in severe shortage, and the US is unlikely to help. They don't have enough themselves. Countries like Kuwait and Qatar have very high missile consumption rates, partly due to inexperience in using them. For a single Iranian missile, multiple crews may engage simultaneously. Instead of 2 interceptors, they expend 5 or 6. Under these conditions, they'll either deplete their missiles very quickly or, more likely, sharply reduce their rate of fire just to preserve some minimum reserve in their arsenals. A lesson for everyone. What's happening now in the Middle East should serve as a serious warning to other countries that are eagerly welcoming American military facilities today. Poland, the Baltic states, Romania all are actively inviting the Pentagon, building bases with their own money in hopes of security guarantees. But guarantees don't exist. There are only interests. And if tomorrow a conflict situation develops, such that American bases in Eastern Europe become priority targets, Washington's response will be exactly what we're seeing now in the Gulf. Americans will save their own soldiers, and the local population will bear the brunt of the attack. Russian writer and laureate of national and international literary awards Sergei Dorovsky emphasizes that hosting foreign military bases on one's territory always carries risk. You become a participant in someone else's conflicts, even if they have nothing to do with you. Your cities, airports, and industrial facilities end up in the crosshairs of the adversaries of the power you've allowed onto your soil, and you have no real leverage over decisions made in the White House. Any deal with the US becomes a deal with the devil, where gains are possible only in the short term. And this is inevitable, because it's predetermined. As the Old Testament says, "For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. It hath no stalk, the bud shall yield no meal, if so be it yield. The stranger shall swallow it up." So what? The US has pulled off a colossal geopolitical scam in the Middle East. They sold there under the guise of protection, receiving in return real bases, real influence, real money, and real political concessions. Now the buyers are starting to file complaints, but it's too late. The missiles are already falling, and the store is closed. American strategy has always been built on fighting with someone else's hands, and on someone else's territory. For this, they need allies willing to offer their land for bases and their infrastructure for logistics. But when real war begins, it turns out these allies are merely bargaining chips in a larger game. Looking at the burning fuel tanks in Bahrain and the smoke over Kuwait's airport, one wants to ask those who today enthusiastically welcome American bases, are you sure you want to repeat this fate? Are you sure the American missile umbrella will protect you rather than attract the storm? Think while there's still time. When the missiles start flying, there'll be no one left to communicate with. All that will remain is ash and the bitter realization that you were simply used.